Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. So we're going to get started on our fourth session of the summer training and research program. If you haven't yet, make sure that you complete the attendance form in order to count this as part of your certificate of program completion. You can either do that using the QR code on the slide or also using the paper forms on the table. Either one is fine. You don't have to do both. Okay. And before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the sacred land on which the University Health Network operates. For thousands of years, it's been the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This territory was subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources across the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people across Turtle Island. Just a couple quick guidelines for today. As always, we will be recording this session. It will be shared with you. We won't be sharing slides because there are no slides for today. We will be doing first a moderated discussion. So I have some questions I'm going to ask the panelists, and then we'll open up to the audience. So keep track of the questions that you have. You can raise your hand, or we'll also open up to Slido, so you can submit your questions anonymously if you prefer. And let's just try to keep the space very respectful as always, and have a great time. So we'll leave it very quickly there and go straight into the discussion. So today's topic is focused on key insights into graduate school. We're really lucky to have four fantastic panelists who are all grad students or were grad students at UHN. And they'll be able to share their experiences with their different programs and their experience in research. We've tried to have representation from both master's and PhD students, as well as multiple different departments. And you'll see that in a second when I introduce them. I also did my PhD at U of T. So if anybody's interested in molecular genetics, I can tell you about my experiences in that department as well. But really, this session is to help you understand all aspects of grad school, any questions that you have if you're considering this path in the future. So just a quick poll to the audience. How many people has considered grad school or is considering grad school? Awesome. Okay, so the people who showed up are interested in grad school. Perfect. So we hope today can help you to really understand some of the aspects of grad school and the process and everything in between. So with that, we'll get it kicked off. So we have four fantastic panelists. I'm going to just run through their names quickly, introduce them, and then we'll go into a session where each one of them will introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them. So first, on the far left or right, whichever way you're looking, we have Elaine Yan, who's a PhD student at the Institute of Medical Sciences at U of T, and she's performing research at Toronto Western. Beside with that, we have Rosamond Brigetley, who is a master's student in the Institute of Medical Sciences at U of T and is performing research at Princess Margaret. We then have Brian Piper, who completed a PhD in the Institute of Biomedical Engineering at U of T and performed research at Kite. And lastly, we have Nicole Bizarre, who, no, okay, I tried. I wrote it down. Phonetically doesn't always work for me. Who's doing her PhD at the Institute of Health Policy and Management and Evaluation at U of T and is performing research at TIER. So we'll first start off with an opening up question. If each of you could introduce yourself, your research, and kind of what sparked your interest in pursuing a grad degree. We can start on this side with Nicole and then go our way down.
Okay, so I'm Nicole. My area of research is education research. So what sparks my interest is thinking about, let me back up a little bit. So I'm a board certified behavior analyst and registered behavior analyst of Ontario. So what that means, I predominantly work with kiddos on the autism spectrum. I'm doing behavioral therapy, so teaching communication, teaching self-help, academic skills. But when I graduated my master's, not really knowing kind of what the clinical world looked like, I caught myself like not understanding how the things I learned in the classroom didn't really always work out in the clinical placement or the clinical environment. And I thought it was just me. It was like, oh my gosh, am I stupid? but it's not. It is a very common problem that a lot of people across healthcare professions experience. So that's what my interested area of research is thinking about specifically problem solving, because we can't train our clinicians to tackle every single problem out there. They need to learn how to be adaptable, flexible, and open to new possible solutions and how to generate those solutions. So my research is teaching problem solving and looking at from a curriculum perspective as to how we design instruction such that the learner can face a new problem that they don't expect, and how they can transfer knowledge across that. So that's kind of what my research is. I also just kind of whatever contract I can get because I like money as a student. That's sometimes hard, and that's the reality of things. So I'll take any kind of contract that's related to any curriculum development. Also, just try to expand my knowledge in that way. So that kind of got me initially to where I am now. So I'm at the Wilson Center here at UHN, which is an education research hub, as well as with TIER, which is again another education research hub. So I just live and breathe that world. What got me into research in general, I actually hated research, but I got into a program and I had a course-based option and a research-based option. And when I met with a supervisor that offered me, they're like, we can give you the research if you're willing to do this one specific study. And I was like, I really don't like research. And she's like, there's a scholarship that's paid for. So I kind of got like, okay, you know what, let me try it. And then all of a sudden fell in love with it. So that was my biggest learning moment is like, I didn't think I would like it as much. I thought I would like the clinical world. But research just allowed me to be like, is that what's going on here? Let's test it out. Let's try it out. Let's see if the answer is there. If it's not, let's problem solve and change. And that's what I like about research so much. So yeah, that's a little bit of my background.
Before we switch to Brian, I just wanted to mention that's a great point about the two different kinds of grad schools. So there is a course-based programs and there's research-based programs. It's important to know the main differences between them. I don't know if Nicole, you want to explain or I can explain.
Yeah, I think I can try.
Go for it.
Course-based is you're literally just taking courses and you're going through the program. Sometimes there's like I've gone to the social sciences world, so you have clinical placement attached to it. So you learn a lot through your courses and then clinical placement. Whereas with research is you're typically still doing the coursework. Like with my program, I did it through Brock. I took all those same courses, but on top of that, I did a thesis. So I did a major research study in which I went through the whole research process and then defended my thesis at the end of it. With that usually comes some funding, which is really, really nice. But I always say that like researcher world is dedicated to that. It's a little bit harder sometimes to tackle other life things. Whereas with the course base, you can kind of start with that.
Yeah, I would say great summary. I think one of the biggest important things to know is the difference in finances between the two. So if you're debating between two programs, to consider course-based programs, you're usually paying tuition and you might not get paid. Whereas research-based programs, you're often paying tuition, but you're also getting paid. You're getting paid to cover the tuition. The finances are very different for different graduate degree programs as well, and that's important to consider if you're debating between them, but the two are very different.
I have one more thing to add.
Yeah.
For a lot of PhD programs, if that's the way that you're thinking about, a lot of them do require a research graduate program to continue your PhD research. So that was something that a lot of my friends, they kind of got stuck and they had to go back and redo or add in their master's thesis so they could continue their education in that way.
Okay, let's continue with Brian.
All right. So my name's Brian. I just completed my PhD. I defended like a week and a half ago. So just recently defended. And my research is just 2 doors over. So on the other side of Mount Sinai is Toronto Rehab and the KITE program there in the rehab hospital. I work with the Sleep TB lab, which focuses on sleep apnea and respiratory disorders. But when my research began here, I shifted things more towards heart failure monitoring. So specializing in textile or wearable electrodes to monitor body fluid related to heart failure. So if you know anyone who has congestive heart failure, I'm guessing a lot of people tangentially know someone because that's the statistic in the world. Over time, your body decompensates and gets extra fluid as your heart gets weaker and weaker. And so having an early warning system like measuring your body fluid daily can help patients kind of get help before it becomes an issue and they start feeling like chest pain, shortness of breath. So that's what my research has been about. And then in terms of how I got into research, I took the research master's program. So after my undergrad, I did a master's in biological engineering at the University of Guelph, if anyone is from there. But I did a thesis-based master's compared to the master's by coursework, which closes off the option for a research-based PhD, because a PhD is research-based. So that's what I did. I know a lot of people that also did what's called direct entry. So if you're in the middle of doing, or if you go into a master's by research, you can just upgrade and do both degrees at the same time. Write one thesis, leave with a PhD instead of a master's. Takes a little longer. That's the option. Yeah, my background.
Okay, my name's Rosamund. I'm at the Princess Margaret Cancer Research Tower, and I'm sort of on the wet lab side. I'm doing a research-based master's right now. Okay, so what sparked my interest in research? I feel like I have a few points to that. In, say, like back in high school even, I was just very curious, like when science teachers would say, oh, this is how this works, I sort of was like, oh, how do we know that, or why, or whatever. So then I sort of was like, well, I should probably go science. And then I did my undergrad in biochem. And then during that, you obviously take lots of different courses. And my favorite ones were always the wet lab classes. So then that steered me in the direction of research, and then specifically in the direction of wet lab research. So then in undergrad, I looked for research positions in summer, and I did 3 summers in the same lab, and it was an oncology lab and cell biology. And it was something I really enjoyed, and I liked the independence compared to sort of undergrad, like the coursework. So that, again, steered me in the direction of a research-based master's, and also kind of confirmed my liking of both oncology and wet lab. So that was sort of what steered me towards Princess Margaret.
My name's Elaine. I'm a 4th year PhD student at IMS, and so I'll be going to my final year next year in September. So I'm affiliated with the Department of Anesthesia and Pain Management, and my research primarily focuses on working with older surgical patients. And just a little bit more about my research. So my research focuses on examining risk factors associated with worse surgical outcomes, specifically the role of cognitive impairment, how that relates to recovery after surgery, and how it's associated with other meaningful patient-centered outcomes like mental health, frailty, functional disability. And I think the overarching goal of my research is to see how we can improve perioperative care for older patients, and just basically the surgical experience for patients. And why I got into research. So I did my undergrad here at U of T, and I did a neuroscience specialist and a psychology major. So I've been here for almost 10 years at U of T. But my neuroscience specialist program was very research intensive, where I got to do my independent research project. And I did that, and I also did a lot of like different courses related to neuroscience. And the one that really interested me during undergrad was taking classes on disorders related to the nervous system. That's what really interested me, but I feel like I didn't learn enough about it in undergrad, and I just wanted to learn more about it. And that's kind of why I kind of decided to do research. And I also just wanted to kind of leverage what I learned in undergrad to see how I can apply what I've learned to real life patient-centered care.
Amazing. And so, Lee, did you do a master's previously, or did you come into a direct PhD program or transfer?
Yeah, so I did a transfer. So I did 2 years of master's, and during my 2nd year, I transferred to a PhD.
Great. And can you tell people a little bit about your experience with that process, or why you chose that path?
Yeah, Honestly, I was given the option to transfer and I wasn't too sure exactly what I want to do after my master's, so I thought I might as well give it a try and transfer to a PhD. And also because my project at the time was ongoing and I kind of wanted to kind of see it through. So that's kind of the reason why I did transfer. And as opposed to the process, it's kind of like defending in your second year of master's. So basically, I think 6 months for IMS at least, 6 months before your defense, you kind of submit a form to the school saying that you want to transfer, and in order to for your transfer to go through, you have to have an internal exam. So that's working is an exam with people that you've been working with, or like your exam committee that you've been kind of communicating in the past 2 years. Once you get approval, then you go on to the external exam. So that's when you have to have an external person that you've never spoken to before to be on your exam committee. And you also have to write your research proposal outlining what you're planning to research for your PhD. So that's kind of the process.
Great. I would say I did the same thing. I started the master's program and transferred to the PhD, and it was for the exact same reason. I felt like at the point where I had to make the decision to defend my master's or continue to my PhD, I felt like things were going well. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life yet, and so I continued on. I would say it's useful if you have more of a clear understanding of what you want to do with your life than I did, but it all works out at the end. But I think it's a really great option if you're not sure whether you want to do a master's or PhD. It's great that you have the choice to start a master's program and transfer to the PhD, because then you're not spending the time writing a thesis for one, defending it, and then starting your PhD. So I really appreciated that feature. So would any of you like to speak about how you chose your area of research and how you found the supervisor that you work with?
I guess maybe I could start off. So kind of related to what I mentioned earlier. So I did neuroscience specialist in my undergrad. So I already knew I wanted to do research related to neuroscience. And in my undergrad, I did a lot of basic research working with rats. But that wasn't really something that really interested me. The most interesting part to me with regards to that basic research was how I can apply it to human data. So, and I never had a chance to be in clinical research in undergrad. So I knew I wanted to do neuroscience related field as well as clinical research. And so that's kind of how I chose the topic. And in terms of choosing my PI, which I think is the next question, I basically just looked on the U of T website, seeing what supervisors are available that are willing to accept students. And to me, it was really important to have a supervisor that's productive, to be in a lab that's productive, in order to make the best out of your graduate school experience. So I would look up their publications, their lab websites. I also look to see what their graduate students are doing and if they're publishing any papers or presenting at conferences to kind of gauge their stage. So that's kind of how I chose my supervisor.
Okay, so I'll just go a little bit more into my project. I maybe glossed over it a bit. So my project it's right at the intersect between biochemistry and oncology. So it's very fundamental biochem, but I like that it was in the context of like human oncology. So I'm looking at how a specific protein folds under hypoxic conditions. So in the absence of oxygen, how do proteins fold, which is obviously relevant to cancer in so much as hypoxia is obviously a critical aspect of cancer research in the tumor microenvironment and all of those things. So that's my general research. What led me to it is my undergrad research was, as I said, it was in oncology, but it was sort of one step up. It was like at the cell biology level. So it was looking at one pathway, the unfolded protein response in breast cancer, which I really liked. But I sort of wanted to go more specific, like more deep into that and look at maybe just one of those aspects, like just one protein even, which was somewhat more based on my undergrad, which was in biochem. So I really liked that area, but I wanted to pivot from cell biology to more biochemistry oncology. So I sort of tried to look, and obviously Princess Margaret was a great place to start. I also was lucky, my undergrad supervisor for my summers was just wonderful. And I actually asked her, I said, like, this is sort of the area I want to be in. You're very well connected in this. Do you know any supervisors who maybe are more on that side? And luckily she did. She knew a few people, and then I reached out and then interviewed with my now supervisor. And my now supervisor proposed a topic, and it was very much what I had wanted out of grad school. So then it sort of went from there. I accepted the position, and that was sort of how I landed. Yeah.
So I've had to do this twice, once for my master's, once for my PhD, because I didn't do direct entry. I went to separate universities. So for my master's, it was as simple as I already had an idea of what the different professors in different classes, what their research was about. Are there any BN students in the room? Just a few? Yeah. So with engineering, like a lot of it is design, and like you take on a project, you're designing something either partway or all the way. And so that can be applied to a bunch of different types of projects. So in my master's, I was working more on biomechanics, so using things like risk assessment for carpal tunnel injury. And that was the focus of my master's. Just by walking up to a prof and saying, hey, I want to do a master's. Do you have funding? Can I be a student? Great, help me with the paperwork. With my PhD, I made the decision to go forward with the PhD, but I very much accidentally found my advisor. So I also looked on websites, papers, places that were labs that were putting out papers that I was interested in. Mostly in biomechanics, because that's what my master's was about. I toured labs, I had interviews, and then I got a cold call email from who ended up being my advisor saying, hey, saw your name like on the list of applicants. Do you want to come and see our lab too? And it's a complete change from biomechanics. So I can still apply all of my undergrad and my master's design experience, but take on a brand new project. And what's really nice about the PhD, especially, is your ability to mold your project for yourself. Your master's will sometimes be very regimented. You've only got 2 years to do it, and so people will be on top of you to keep you on track. The PhD is much more self-motivated, and you get to guide your project. So even though I joined a sleep laboratory, I got to choose, sleep and fluid measurement kind of go hand in hand. There's a lot of application. Where else can I apply this technology? And I can focus my project more on the heart failure side. So I was more interested in that aspect of it.
Nicole. So I also had to choose, I've had to do this twice. The first time, very similar. It was like, I applied, I had this like brilliant idea at the time of what I wanted my master's to be, and then no one was reaching out, and I didn't get an initial interview for it. And then somebody calls me and said, hey, I saw that you were a gymnastics coach. I want to do a sports research study. Would you be interested? And I'm like, no. Like, I literally was like, I want to work with kids on the opposite spectrum. Like, this is my passion. And she fully said, your master's is where you learn how to do research. She's like, whatever you decide at the end of your day for your graduate programs, whether it's your master's or your PhD, you're not tied to that. But the best piece of advice I got was like, your PhD, your master's is learning how to be a researcher. So she's like, this is a very simple, straightforward topic. I can get you out of 2 years, you can get funding. I'm like, okay, great. So that's how I picked her. It was a very much like either a in or out. When it came to my PhD selection, I was a lot more, I slowed myself down a lot more. I thought about, again, I'm not expecting to do this forever, the very specific topic that I'm researching. But I looked at like a broader idea. Like, I like problem solving. I like understanding that. I wanted somebody that had somewhat of a similar background, like within psychology, but not my field. Because I wanted to be pushed outside of what I know as a behavior analyst. So I actually first found the program itself. So I'm in the Health Professions Education Research Stream here at HPME, and they're associated with the Wilson Center. So from that point, I reached out to some of the graduate students and go, hey, like, do you want to chat with me for 2 minutes or 3 minutes? And it ended up being like a 4-hour call. with one of them, and he's like, you know what? At the end of the day, I think these are the three people that you'll mesh well with. Because I didn't want a small lab, I wanted a bigger lab because that's what I had in my master's, and I really liked that. Of having a lot of peers to go to, helping jump on people's projects and getting that exposure. So that was really meaningful to me. So he suggested two people at the end of the day. And so I met with them, and they're pretty much like, you're gonna go with her because you guys are very similar in how you perceive the world. And she's gonna push you really well. So my advisor is Dr. Nikki Woods, and she has very high expectations, and that's what I wanted. But I also wanted someone to support me and guide me through the process. So I really liked her. I still really like her. I literally will do anything she said. But that for me was like, I chose an area of research that I was interested in, that I thought big term or big picture, like this is an area that I could get exposure to very different disciplines and fields. Because sometimes when you surround yourself with people that think exactly like you're not broadening your perspective. And so that's what this work has been in that way. And I keep getting like papers from like completely different fields. I'm like, I don't know how to read this. Or like, and I think that was important for me, was to have that like multidisciplinary type of perspective.
It seems like all of you joined your graduate program with a supervisor already set up. I just want to share my perspective, which was different. The molecular genetics department at UT allows you to apply to the program without having a supervisor picked. And then they have a rotational system, so you can work in 3 labs for 6 weeks each, and then pick which lab you want to do your PhD in. And this is a mechanism that's become more popular over the last couple of years. So there's a lot more programs across Canada that do this now. I didn't like that approach because I wanted to make sure I was in a lab for my PhD that I really loved and was a good fit for me. And so I think it allows you to be able to try out the environment, see if the research techniques you like, but also if the lab culture is good for you, if you like the mentoring style, the supervision style, and all those different aspects. So I actually worked in 3 labs. One was a zebrafish lab, one was a microbiology lab, and one was a systems biology lab. And so I got to try completely different fields on top of the different fields I had tried in my undergrad as well. I think it really helped me to make sure that I was confident in the choice that I was making. So if you're not exactly sure where you want to be, trying to pick a program with rotation can be a great option. Okay. I'll open a question about the future. So how do you think your graduate degree will influence your career in the future? Anyone want to start?
This question made me laugh.
Oh, very hard.
But yeah, do you want to go ahead? No, it's a very good question that makes you like think, okay, what am I trying to get out of grad school? Even if you're like already in it, it's a good way of sort of, it made me dissociate a bit and be like, oh yeah, okay. So it's a very good question. I would say, in essence, yes, hopefully grad school like gets you a job that you like after. But more than that, I think grad school teaches you a lot about yourself, which is cheesy, I know, but it'll teach you what you value in a workplace or in a lab or in research, in the sense of, are you a people person? Do you really want to be around people and want that interaction, potentially like a client-facing job? Or do you like the sort of isolated, individual, independent research, which might be something you experience in grad school? Are you very organized? Do you need direction from your supervisor? Or do you like a hands-off approach? I think grad school is very good at teaching you both what you're good at and also what you need work in. And I think it probably, following grad school, you'll have a better idea of what careers will match those skills and things you need to improve in. So yeah, a job, and also hopefully a job that you are well suited to.
I guess I can kind of say this from a perspective of I am currently job hunting, and really grad school gives you the chance to build your skills and like know what you want, but you are not stuck in even the position that you think you will end up with because of your degree. So in my PhD, I have taken an engineering degree, I've got design experience, but I'm very much not just looking for engineering design jobs. I have had my hand dipped in data analytics, in like cardiac monitoring, so lab technician skills. There's like research positions, scientist positions, educator positions. So it opens up a lot more doors than you think just by taking one degree. With a lot of you in sciences, I imagine like you kind of picture work as one day I'll be in a lab, and grad school can kind of open up levels of employment. So if you get your bachelor's, you can work in a lab. If you get your master's, you can be a supervisor in that lab. And if you get your PhD, you can be a manager or a PI in that lab. Not to say that those doors are closed to you if you don't take a PhD, but it kind of gives you a baseline of what you can expect out of your career trajectory and how far you can go up. That being said, there are lab managers who got their BN or their BSc and they just put in the work, put in the hours, and they ascended to that position just by knowing their lab so well. You don't need it, but it's a good way to get the experience before you get there.
I agree completely, and I'd say those kind of ladders that you're talking about also work outside of research and academia as well. So if you want to work in industry, you can work in industry with a bachelor's, but you might be a technician. And if you have a master's, you would start at a different level. If you want to run an independent lab in industry, then you need to have a PhD. So thinking about the kind of levels of what those additional degrees will open the doors for you. But yeah, in most cases, there aren't jobs that you can't access somehow or another, unless it's like, obviously you need to be have a law degree to become a lawyer. A lot of the life sciences jobs, you can take different paths to get there. You can compensate for degrees with work experience, but there are some classic paths that people take.
As an example, like I applied to a job in the last few months. And keep in mind, my background is in biomedical cardiac monitoring engineering. And I applied to a job that had like on its mission statement, do you like Lego? And I didn't get that job, but it was using the design skills. So that particular company designs educationally focused playground equipment for children in parks and schools. And then you also go and you build it and you like monitor the building and further design. And so that focused on the design experience I have. There's other jobs I've applied to that uses no design at all. It's all like behind a computer data analytics. So those are just skills I picked up by never leaving school.
Nicola?
I would also build on that, right? Like the skill that you get from whatever program you end up deciding to choose, if you choose, it depends on how much you put into it, right? Like if you go in, you do your research project, you don't do any other projects, those are the skill sets that you build. Whereas I've kind of gone on to any project I say yes to, and I try to make it as diverse as possible. So I'm a quantitative researcher, I'm doing qualitative work. I interview people, I love that. But it's skills that you're gathering and you're building in your own tool set, or your toolbox. So I think how diverse those skills are really up to you once you move through. I thought I was going to be in academia, and that was kind of the end goal of all of this, is to be a prof full time. And then I realized I really, really like working in industry. So I have a business that I run now, and I create online learning modules for various companies across healthcare. And it's a nice way of making some side hustle in that way. But it also I'm using everything that I've learned to make myself better in the world, and a lot more competitive in that way. So again, I don't know what will end up being, because a month ago I would have said I needed full time off, and now I'm I value flexibility. I value job stability as well. I don't want to be fighting for tenure. So is that something? I don't know yet. So I think my end goal of 2 years, do this in 2 years, I think was hopefully just have something stable and have ability to be flexible and creative into the skill sets that you build.
I think that's another good point too, that some of the careers that you might pursue in the future, you don't really know exist when you first start. you're exploring as you go, learning new things, exploring different options, and you could have opportunities that you never dreamed of before, which is fantastic.
And technology changes, like online modules were not big until COVID hit, so.
Fair point.
I think for me, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot since I'm hoping to defend next June, so it's kind of coming up for me. What I've learned during my grad school is that I really like to analyze data, interpreting results, and putting it into a story as a publication itself. So I'm kind of considering like scientific communication, and because I work with patients a lot in clinical research, I really like dealing with patients. So I'm also considering applying to med school. So that's my dilemma right now.
Fair, yeah. And people change career paths a lot. You don't have to have everything figured out. I think that one of the things that's really interesting about grad school is you can go into it not knowing what you want to do with your life, and it's a great way to test drive yourself, try out different techniques, try out different career areas, find what your interests are. Or if you're a person who knows what you want to do at the end of grad school, you can design your graduate school process and experience to set yourself up to achieve those goals best. So for people, I have colleagues who knew that they wanted to work in industry as a scientist from the very get-go when they started. So those people could find labs to work in where they would be learning techniques that were needed in industry. So for protein purification or antibody productions, things that they can have to build that tool set. So when they were on the job market, they would have those marketable skills that would make them more likely to be hired quickly. Or if somebody, wanted to become an entrepreneur in the future, you could pick labs that focused on translatable research or with scientists who do have their own startup companies or things like that, so you can make sure you got that experience. So where you are on your career discovery path can really help you or open up different opportunities of how you might look at grad school and which labs or programs you might choose. So what have been the most rewarding or challenging aspects of your program? You want to start?
Yeah, I would say the most rewarding part is I've been very fortunate to have a supervisor who's very supportive and motivating. She also involves me in a lot of projects, and because now that I have a bit more experience in research now, she involves me as a kind of supervising role for a lot of projects I'm leading. And also just like coming up with new study designs, set protocols, research topics really. So just kind of like being able to direct other people as well. In addition to that, I think just sharing your work, either that's through publication, conference presentations, or just presentations to like nurses, hospital grand rounds, like sharing your work is very rewarding to me.
Anyone else want to share?
Very much the same, being able to supervise as you get more experience and knowing that you've gained as like also getting some of that management experience, looking after the younger students or undergrads, like having them come in and like, teaching someone as well as performing research. I will say that like coming from my master's, when I started, I was the only student. And by the time I left, there were 2 other students, but their research was not connected to mine in the slightest. So I spent 2 years very much alone in a lab, tinkering away and finishing. My PhD has been a completely different experience, working in a much larger lab, way more access to collaboration. In our lab, we have people who like really know their stats. And so they kind of get their chance to jump in on projects to help other people learn more about their stats. And then other people are like much better at that, or they have more experience in the patient-facing side. And so we kind of get to jump around and help each other as well, which is really nice.
Mine's cheesy. It's like really just seeing the impact of like I think within education and doing education research, it's like seeing a meaningful impact. I teach at George Brown, and I myself am a much better educator now, having gone through the process of thinking about education research, how you design things. And now I have students who are working in the field, and they send me messages of being like, "This is that was the best class, and it was like an intro class. And just really like hearing that impact. And even just seeing it across the board. Like I'm doing right now some education with PSWs and diabetic patients, and just like actual meaningful impact of like, I just delivered a 3-hour workshop, and now their feedback is like, I actually got to be using it in practice, and it would made a positive difference. So I think that's been like the biggest thing with all of it. And I think, kind of to echo Brian's point, it's like getting to work with people who are like experts in what they do and learning about it. Like I hate staff, although I'm a quantitative researcher, I let those staff people do that. But I get to learn, you know, and just kind of create opportunities for people, like for my projects, to bring people in. That was really cool, just like the partnerships that you make across the board. Yeah, so it's cheesy.
Okay, I have a few. So I have mine, and then I also tried to poll some people from my lab so I could like give a more broad, because everybody thinks different things are hard in grad school and different things are rewarding. So mine is like, it's the same thing, is rewarding and challenging. And it's essentially that your project is your own. Like there's, at least in most cases, you're the only one doing your exact project. You're doing it day in, day out, essentially independently. Maybe there's some collaboration, but really you're kind of doing it and you're leading it. So it's very rewarding, because anything that works, you've done. Like you've problem solved, you've figured it out, you've got that data, and it's very fulfilling. But it's also very challenging, because you can have long periods of time where things aren't working, and that's also on you to figure out. So you have to own the parts that aren't working and figure out how to make them work for your project. So it's sort of two sides of the coin. Other people in my lab had some good ones too, which I completely agree with. It is very rewarding to see your progress, whether it's in, say, defending, like in your committee meetings, or presenting, or just like on a technical experiment where you can say, I was really bad at this 3 months ago, and now consistently I'm getting clean results. That's very satisfying. Also, to become a specialist in your area is very nice. So in your lab, you're probably, again, the only person doing your exact research project. So it's very fulfilling to learn about that, and then have people come and ask and say, oh, have you read about this, or have you done this type of experiment? And you can try and sort of leverage what you've learned in your area to help people. And then in terms of challenge, transitioning from undergrad to grad school, I'd say like the motivation and discipline piece, because in undergrad, a lot of it's very laid out for you. Take these courses, memorize these chapters, write these exams, and barring catastrophe, you will graduate. Grad school is not exactly like that. It's very sort of malleable, and you have to direct it. Nobody is saying, oh, this week you need to run this experiment, and next week you need to do this. You need to plan that, and you need to know, okay, this month I need to do this, and next month I need to do that, so that you graduate in a timely fashion. So being disciplined and motivated is something that's quite different than undergrad, I think, and it's a different type of discipline, because nobody is laying it out for you in the exact same way. Otherwise, I had someone in my lab said this, and I thought it was very wise. Learning to advocate for yourself and your project is something that nobody has experience in undergrad, really. And that's something that is uncomfortable, but you have to get better at, in that, again, you're doing it day in and day out. So people can provide suggestions, and your supervisor will have a wealth of knowledge, but you have to also be able to say, maybe that's not feasible, or maybe I can't do that in the time that I have left. Or maybe that needs to be passed off to a different student, or maybe, yes, that is something I can do. Like, you need to be able to take on projects and also know what's feasible, and that's something that is definitely, like, I'm trying to learn, and I think every grad student goes through that process. And then my final one is, this is something I struggled with, like in my first committee meeting, I felt it very uncomfortable. But there's no syllabus, so you don't know what you don't know. There's no list of things that may come up, like there's no textbook to go to. So you have to be comfortable with the fact that you can't know everything, and you can't know what questions are going to be asked to you, and you have to try and know as much as you can, and then just sort of say, that's as good as it's going to get for this period of time, and then you go back and you read more, and so on and so on. but it's a very different vibe than going into like an exam in undergrad. You say, okay, I know this topic, I know all the questions in the review, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's definitely something that you have to like mentally adjust to in grad school.
It's a really good point. Like in your defense, you will get questions
Yeah.
out of left field. Completely valid answers. I have no.
And then you just sort of say, you're like, that's a great question, and I will go and read about that.
Probably add that to my thesis.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to for today.
Yeah.
No, I think grad students often, they're the first ones to admit that you know a lot about a very specific thing, but you also know that you don't know a lot. Because you're kind of you're at the edge of discovery. So there's so much that you don't know, and you know the intimate details of everything you can't understand.
Yeah.
Which is really a different mindset when you're coming out of undergrad. And in undergrad, you know that you study this textbook, they'll test you on that topic, and you feel a little bit more like an expert.
Yeah.
Coming out of grad school, I felt less like an expert.
Very much teaches you how to Google.
Grad school teaches you
How do you form a good question to ask and how to find the answer for yourself.
Also on that, like it teaches you how to be painfully honest. Like you cannot fake it. Say your first committee meeting, the people on your committee, well, at least in my case, at that point and probably forever, know way more about my topic than I know. And you can't fake that. So they ask you a question and you can't sort of, oh, you know, maybe this, maybe like they know if you're lying and they know if you're sort of like pretending, and they also know if you're getting it completely wrong. So I think grad school is very good for teaching you to just honestly say, I don't know, that's a really good question, I'm gonna go look at that. Or you get better at saying perhaps this, like I read a paper and maybe it's this. But I think it teaches you to be very, very honest with yourself about what you know and don't know.
And I guess to add up on that, so like for my committee, so my supervisor is a anesthesiologist, but in my committee, all the other members are like different but relevant discipline. So I have geriatrician, neurologist, psychiatrist. So you just have to accept that you don't know everything because they're going to ask you questions that they know best, and sometimes you just don't know everything. So not to be too hard on yourself.
Yeah. I have one point to jump onto that as well. Took me a while to realize this is that like you have a diverse committee for a reason, and they're there to help pick out the flaws, such that you don't do that. Hopefully, right? Figuring that out, like you want the best brains on your thesis committee, so that they help you learn, or they'll be like, oh, okay, you know what? This is the article you need to read. Here you go. So I think like when you think about forming your committee, thinking about that, like I was very adamant on mine. I was like, I want people that are gonna be nice to me, but that are really good and experts in these specific areas. So that like when I do my thesis proposal, I just defended mine a month ago. It was very much just a conversation, being like, okay, actually, what can make it better? Like this right here. And then we had the board going and like restructuring things. And it's not so much a test, at least in my program. It's more of as a community, you're building your own, they're helping you build your project a little bit more. So it's better, more likely to work hopefully in that way.
Yeah. I would say one of the biggest challenges that I had in grad school was the fact that in undergrad, it's kind of like you're doing a series of sprints. You start the course, you do your midterms, you have your exams, and then you get like a week at least or 2 weeks where you're not thinking about any of your courses. You're done those courses, you leave them behind, you start again. In grad school, you're there for 5 to 6 to 7 or 8 years with no breaks. Like obviously you take vacation, you take time off, and you should support your wellness. But there's never a time where you actually get a break in your program. Like it's consistent for 5 or 6 years, or shorter if you're doing your master's. So it's a really long marathon, and it's up to you to not only motivate yourself in your work, but also to put your boundaries in and protect your mental health as well. I often found it really hard when I was on vacation to turn things off or turn my brain off, because you're in charge of your project. So when you're not working on your project, it's not going anywhere. Like you're the one that's driving it. So when you take time off, your project takes time off too. That could be a hard thing to manage, especially at the beginning, is budgeting those breaks in appropriately, because you need the breaks in order to be able to think creatively and to think your best.
The beauty of that though is that there's some flexibility. Like I have a hardcore, I usually don't work on Fridays, but this is the exception because this is my errand day. And I usually work on the weekends instead. So I have the flexibility that if I had a parent in the hospital, I can jump in and make sure I'm there with them. I can work wherever I need to, at least with my research if I'm not in the lab. Like that. So there's a lot of flexibility. And again, like you're driving your project. So like I just took a month off for other reasons, and I'm okay with that. My project can sit there, wait until I'm ready to push it forward when I need to. So there's a lot of flexibility within that, again, depending on your program.
I thought about that a lot when I was picking my research area because I was thinking I wanted something that I could stick in the freezer and leave and walk away. So I didn't want to work with mice that would, or fish that need to be fed. Somebody has to be there every day to feed the zebrafish lab. So I would put my microbes in the freezer, walk away, and it was so great.
I had an interview and I was like looking cool, and it was like I had this terrible stress that I wasn't gonna get in anywhere, so I applied to the most random things that like I didn't want, and like I interviewed with this prof doing zebrafish, and during the interview I was thinking I don't want to do this, and then he told me that I would need to come in over Christmas break to feed the fish, and I was no.
I rotated in a lab that was like that, and they would have like schedules of who had to feed the fish over Christmas, but the people who lived abroad,
Yeah.
they didn't have to feed them. So I was like, oh, I know I'm in Toronto. I'd have to feed the fish every day
Yeah.
because I'm the one here. Like, no, I'm not doing that.
Even in facilities that have staff that are supposed to do it, you have to be there to supervise. In my undergrad, I worked in a lab, collecting chicken eggs and collecting shell thickness, and yeah, you have to go because no one else is going to do it.
Right.
Like
Yeah, the staff are gonna be off.
the staff only do so much. Like they're there to really give the welfare of the animals. They're not there to collect your data for you.
Okay, that might be a good place to pause and open up for questions. So does anybody want to start off? Now let's turn the slide on. I'll turn the slide on.
This is like now we get to bring the coffee to the hot minute.
Yeah, exactly.
We all get to take a break for a second.
We could ask you a question.
Definitely bring like co-pilot out. What is the responses?
Made it funny when I kept on telling people a good PhD defense is a good PhD offense.
Perfect, yeah.
Happy helpful, you're done.
Okay, there's a question for you.
A couple of you mentioned getting into like research labs in your undergrad, and I was wondering how you would recommend doing that because I think it's quite competitive, like especially in the larger universities.
Just ask. If a lot of red tape can be cut if you have a professor that you've already spoken to and is willing to accept you as an undergraduate research assistant or as a master's student or as a PhD student. If they already have spoken to you and have said, yep, I'll take you, then done deal. Like red tape gets cut so that you can do that.
So I went to UT for undergrad and I had such a difficult time finding someone who will take me in as someone with no experience, right? So I think the most important thing is network. So talk to professors, ask if you're doing research. If not, ask to see if they know anyone doing research, because that's how I landed my position.
So some people leverage it, like I didn't go to UT, I went to U Ottawa, but I knew some people leveraged, like they would ask a prof, can I volunteer? And it's not ideal and it's not perfect, but sometimes if you volunteer and then you sort of build a rapport with that prof in that lab, then you can say, okay, next summer can I work here? But yeah, and also I knew friends in undergrad that would find profs' office hours and then show up and sort of say like, I might not be in your class, but I've read your website, I've read your publications, I'm super interested. Most profs just want to know that like you're enthusiastic, you want it, you're not going to be dead weight, you're going to show up and do what they need. So if you go and you sort of show that, it helps. Yeah.
Also to add to that, like the current students that are in their lab, like reach out to them. Like
Yeah.
I have some tasks I just don't want to do. And that's a great opportunity to get involved in research, right? And I think part of it is like that's a nice kind of way in if they have a grad student base, because I can be like, okay, this person reached out to me, they kind of seem interested. And then I would go to Ms. Rose and be like, hey, like, is that okay if I like take on a volunteer for a bit? And that's good experience for the graduate student themselves. So I think you can go kind of so many different ways and leverage your network. Like I think the first research experience I got was my mom, who's a researcher as well. She was like, hey, like I can sneak you in. If you want to schedule meetings, like get printing. Like I remember doing like the worst tasks of like, I don't want to look at the citations. Can you please like format all the references for me? And you just leverage who you know in that way. So we'll go as many ways, and there's, you know, nepotism's fine sometimes.
I think there's also some universities like UT have work studies programs that you can start, so you can start doing those tasks. They're funded by the government, so it helps you to be able to have those positions that are paid as well, and then you can leverage them for research positions later. But I agree with Nicole. I would meet with almost any undergrad who reached out to me because very few people reached out to me. They all reached out to my supervisor, who was really, really busy. But like I was busy, but I had free time too. And then if I liked somebody because they showed interest and they actually tried to read the papers and ask good questions, then I would recommend them to my boss. She would always hire them. So I'd say, you know, if the route you're taking isn't working, try different paths. There are awards you can apply to if you come with funding that makes you more competitive as well. We host an information session in the fall on how to get summer research positions, so that can be helpful. I'm always happy to meet and chat too. But I think all of you are in this room right now, you're already doing a lot right. So leveraging the experiences that you find while you're at UHM as well. That's great.
Sorry, just one small comment to make. Reach out to your TAs, because they're usually like grad students, and make connections that way.
Oh yeah, so we'll take one here and then we'll take one for slide.
Yeah, so it was basically just a response to that, and that's exactly what I was gonna say. Like my TAs have been like the best people to talk to because like especially my lower years, I was kind of scared to talk to profs. So like the TAs were like the next step below. So there's definitely like 2 TAs that have helped me like so much. One of them like was my second year TA, and she basically rewrote my resume for me. And then my other TA that I really like have a lot of a connection to is the person who actually brought me into the lab that I'm in today. Yeah, because she was my TA for like a lab course that I was taking, and she saw my skills and she thought that it would.
I think that's another great thing, and build off of what we discussed in the last session. It was like you being having skills in the lab or doing your best in those courses is what helped that TA to be like, oh, I want to recommend them. Whereas if you're a person who doesn't show up to class, isn't responsible, or doesn't prepare for your labs, or isn't technically good in the labs, then you can reach out to that TA, but they're not going to want to help you. So you doing the best you can in everything that you do also helps people around you to recognize that you have value, and then they'll want to help you as well. Okay, we have a question. What happens if you're in a really great lab in undergrad and your supervisor expects you to continue in the lab, but you want to go abroad for grad school? I would say this absolutely happened to me. Not abroad, but I did my undergrad in the lab at Mount Sinai, and they encouraged me to apply to grad school and expected me to stay, but then I rotated in different labs and decided that wasn't right for me. And I think the only thing you can do is be honest. Be honest with them about what your intentions are, and just tell them the different things that you want to get out of your career or out of your grad degree, especially if your intention is to go abroad. That's something they can't offer you. So they'll respect your decision.
I will also add to that, there are opportunities to do collaborations. We have people in our labs that have gone abroad and done like 3 to 4 months in a university in France, and then the lab also gets people back from that university. And then there's also joint degrees. So not just domestic joint degrees, but you can find places that will often have like you get to take courses from both U of T and a foreign university, and then you also get to like have a supervisor here and a supervisor there. So there's a lot of options.
Yeah, this absolutely happened to me. I'm from Winnipeg, and I would always go home for summers, and I did research at the University of Manitoba over summer. but I wanted to do grad school in Toronto. Like I knew that there was a lot of opportunity at U of T and Princess Margaret I knew would be really wonderful. But I loved the lab I was in undergrad. Like it was incredible. It was the best experience. I learned a ton. It was amazing. And it was something like they offered I could continue there. And it's a little bit uncomfortable because there was nothing wrong with that lab. The supervisor's wonderful. The lab was great. It just was, I wanted a slightly different project in a different city. And at first I sort of shied away and was like, oh, maybe I will, maybe I don't know, I'm thinking about it. And it actually was way better. At some point I sort of said, like, this is my goal from grad school. And I want to try and get in Toronto. And then my supervisor, she was wonderful. And she flipped and she was like, oh, absolutely. Like, you should email these people. So sometimes when you're honest, like, they also should want to help you get where you want to. So, like, it's uncomfortable, but I would just lay it out and they'll probably be more helpful than you think they will be.
It happens to them all the time. Like they have lots of undergrads that they experience and lots of them leave their labs. It's not a big, like it's the first time you're doing it, it feels really personal to you. But they go through this kind of stuff all the time, so they don't take it personally.
And that person is probably a pretty good reference on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think you want to keep your relationship with those people good because you're going to need them as reference. Your honor, you might be. Okay. This one is for Brian, probably. How hard is it to get into biomedical engineering if you don't have coding or strong physics or math background from your undergrad?
I took one coding class in first year undergrad, took nothing away from it. And all I can say is I learned how to code in graduate school. So the fact that you don't have those specific skills at the start, like just by needing to do things for your project, you take it on yourself to learn the things that you need, whether that is through a course at the university. Like I took science courses in grad school. I took the required courses that I needed to take, but then I had to self-teach myself and seek out resources to learn more things like Python or MATLAB coding. So any skills that you feel that you're lacking, as long as it's not a prerequisite to the program, you'll be fine because you can pick up those skills in the program. The prerequisites are just the bare minimum, and I know a ton of people who've gone into grad school having failed multiple undergrad courses, including ones that were directly related to what they did for their masters. But they took it again, they passed it, and they had a supervisor willing to take them because they showed the work ethic to put in the time to fill those gaps.
Sorry, I'm having some back-end support here. Okay, thank you. We have a great question for master's degree. Should you do something different than your undergrad focus? They would assume that they would get more tools under their belts, but what if they don't like it? So do you recommend staying in a similar field or transitioning to a different field?
Choose something you're actually interested in. Is that something you're going to be working on for at least like 2 years? So you need to be passionate, you need to be curious, and you need to be like persistent.
Yeah, I'd say like whatever your undergrad focus is, if you like it enough that you can imagine doing that area every day for 2 years or 5 or whatever it is, if you do a PhD, then stay. Like if you like it that much and you say, oh, this is what I want to do, then that's probably extremely lucky that you found it in undergrad. If you're going, this is sort of the safe option, but I don't love this, I would say apply for a master's, and then that's not, you don't have to go into a PhD, you can transition if you like it, but it's a good way to go in and see if there's something that you maybe enjoy more. I wouldn't say stick with that focus just because you've done a summer in it, unless you're really in love with it.
I have different advice. I've changed careers 3 times in the last 10 years. I would not expect, like if you asked me when I was 18 and applying for my Bachelor of Social Work degree, I wanted to be a lawyer. And it wasn't until I started pivoting and being open to possibilities, like when I was applying for my master's, I applied to Master's of Social Work twice and got rejected. And I was like so convinced that's what I wanted to do. And then my program director, I did a post-grad certificate for 8 months because my mom was like, you're not going to be out of school for that long, otherwise you're not going to go back. So I did a postgrad certificate, and the program director was like, so you're gonna go do a master's in this. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I didn't understand what I was even applying to sometimes in the beginning. But there was like the reason I didn't get accepted to the master's program, and I was open to willing to try something. Now a master's, yes, it's 2 years. It's only 2 years. Like once you start going into your PhD, like you'll still gain a huge amount of skill sets. Do you want to actually like what you're doing? Probably. Like that helps the process. But I think be willing to change as you need, because I would literally not be where I am today unless I was willing to accept a pivot. When people were saying like they were kind of like nudging at me like, no, this is what you would probably be really good at. And in 10 years of my career so far, like everything's changed. Like I'm completely different about it. So I think like be interested, that'd be great, but also be open to programs that you never even thought could work for you, because I think that you'll learn still a lot from it. But if you don't like math, then you decide to do a master's in math. Like that may not be nice. But I think like again, just having that like curiosity, you'll learn from anything hopefully that you do.
Your undergrad is general enough that you have skills to a wide variety of options. But you're also not locked out after your master's. Like I went from biomechanics in my master's to more like clinical side in my PhD, and you're never locked out of anything. You can always tailor your project the way that you want to do it within reason, and you have flexibility as well.
And I think at the beginning, when you're first getting started in undergrad, you may have to pitch your experiences in particular ways to make yourself more competitive. So if you have some research experience in, let's say my first research experience was with mass spectrometry. So for my second research experience, I applied to jobs in mass spectrometry because that's what I had a skill set in. Is what made me competitive. But then for my third one, I was like, okay, now I have research skills. I don't need to pitch that technical skill because I don't actually like that. And you can transfer the research skills that you have to different fields. So knowing sometimes when you should be more flexible or when you should be, being competitive by building on the experience you have, but always trying to keep your mind open to different experiences. You don't know what you don't know, as well as trying to find something that interests you. I think it's great. Another question. So we talked a little bit about how all of your research areas and how you kind of navigated that. How would you maybe advice you would give to somebody who doesn't know what research area that they're interested in, or that are trying to figure out which research area they should go into in grad school?
One thing I could say is consider a master's by coursework, because by definition, if you don't know what field you want to be in research, a master's by coursework can be a good opportunity to gain those same research skills, but you also run the risk of like locking yourself out of the research PhD. That being said, in the vein of not locking yourself out of anything, you can also switch from coursework to thesis partway through. So I've known lots of people who have done that, they're reaching the end of their 1 year master's by coursework and they realize, nope, I really love the lab work, the research. So I'm going to find an advisor that will switch me up and I'll just turn my major project into my thesis. So there's avenues out of that as well that can give you more time to find that interest.
You can also do the opposite sometimes. Like I've had people start a thesis-based master's and then say, this is actually not for me. And they just drop into coursework, right? And so you have the flexibility as you need for that.
I'd say like look at your courses in undergrad, whatever your degree is in. You probably have taken a lot of general things. Like you take bio, you take chem, you take physics, you take math. Generally in science, you have to take a whole bunch of things. I would look at the courses you've taken and then say, which of these did I actually positively enjoy doing? Not nobody enjoys midterms, nobody enjoys finals, but content wise, like did I enjoy physics? Did I enjoy chemistry? And then if so, try and sort of hone in on that. Say you enjoyed like in my case, I really enjoyed my chemistry classes. I would, if I could go back, I would suggest find people in labs in those areas. Like even if you don't know, oh, maybe I want to do chemistry, maybe I don't. Find a chemistry lab, email someone in the lab and say, do you have time for 15 minutes to have coffee? And then ask, like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Because I found it very hard to read a paper and then extrapolate what would this actually mean I'm doing every day. Like I could read a paper from a lab, but it didn't tell me, okay, you're gonna be doing Western blots every week, you're gonna be doing TC and cell culture and or mouse work or whatever it was. It's sort of hard to extrapolate. So I think it's good, find your area, then find a lab and ask people in that lab, what do you actually do every day? And then go, okay, what would I like doing that? And obviously that's not a surefire way, but I feel like it's a good way to rule things out because they might say, oh, like the mouse one, I work with mice and I do this and that. And you might go, I don't really want to do that. And then you can rule that out, and that's helpful also. So that would be my advice.
I agree. I also think if you try to read review papers in different fields and see which ones you're interested in reading further. I know I had to read a lot of papers, obviously through your degrees, and there's some you care to read more about and dig into more, and there's some you don't. And that kind of gives you a sense of your natural tendencies of what you're interested in. I'd also say try out different research if you can, try out different techniques. The zebrafish lab that I worked in had the most interesting research. They were like regenerative heart research. You got to like watch zebrafish beating hearts with different fluorescent proteins. Like it was really cool. But technically, I could not sit under a microscope and inject embryos with this like really small liquid, like needle. It just technically wasn't something that I could do, and it gave me headaches. So that was something I obviously wasn't going to continue to do. So just trying different things out, I think, can help as well.
Goes on your resume. Any lab experience, if you have to, use a needle under the microscope and everything, that's a skill on your resume as well. So
Absolutely.
good experiences.
So what are the expectations as an incoming grad student in the first year and the challenges that you experienced? So any advice you would give maybe for a first year grad school student?
Something that's been touched on already, but having the clear boundary of when you're working on research and when you get your own time. Because you will get burnt out if you're just focusing on one thing the whole time. So having that clear separation, setting clear boundaries for yourself, I think is very important.
Yeah, I'm sort of in this boat because I only started in September, so I'm like almost a year in. I'd say that's very important. Like it's different than undergrad in that undergrad, like you're studying at strange hours of the day or you're whatever. It's not like on a strict 9 to 5 schedule. At least it wasn't for me. So I found it helpful to try and treat grad school like a job, sort of like set your hours and say, okay, I'm going to try and work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And sometimes it's not, like I have experiments that you need to be there later, you need to go on the weekend or whatever, but having those sort of, generally speaking, I'm going to go every day and I'm going to have sort of a work-life commitment on time. I think that's wise. In terms of what were the expectations in your first year, I guess it really depends on the lab. They don't have as high expectations as you think they do, I suppose. Like they don't expect you to come in with all of this knowledge about your project. I don't think. Like you need to come in willing to learn a lot about your project and learn it as quickly as you can, but you don't need to come in on September 1st with all of this background. I think like in my case, the first semester was a lot of like learning techniques and reading a lot of papers. And then once you sort of understand where your project lies, sort of in all the literature, then you can like, okay, now I'm actually gonna start my experiments. But I don't like day one, you're not, oh, you need to give a synopsis of your whole project and know how to do every experiment. That like there is time, even in a master's, to get your feet under you.
Yeah, the expectation for your master's is that you have finished your undergrad, which means you do not need to know any more information between finishing your undergrad and starting your master's. The first year, you still take courses, so that will be familiar, and it's very much planning, learning techniques, writing proposals. If your prof wants you to find funding, it'll be writing grant applications, things like that. Really, for a master's, like your research only takes off after probably nothing in the first semester will be actually related to anything that you publish in your thesis. It all starts later. So it's a relatively slow start compared to what you're thinking of as showing up 9 to 5, working in a lab. It starts with coursework.
I will say on that though, yeah, definitely. Like there is a pitfall I found in beginning your master's that the beginning is quite slow because you're reading papers, you're taking some classes. It's not like super time strict that you're in the lab till 8 p.m. or anything. But that can feel like you have a lot of time. Like it can make you sort of slow down and say, oh, I have lots of time. I can sort of take this easy. I don't have to come in on Monday or whatever it is. And I would try not to fall into that trap. Like get the coursework done, get the sort of background knowledge into your head, and then as soon as you can start trying to do your experiments or whatever it is, because as soon as you start really doing your experiments, and this is something that everybody in my lab has sort of reminisced over, once you start your experiments, you wish you had longer to get them done. So I will say just sort of be cognizant of that, and as you're able to just sort of like get the motions going, because things don't always go as you plan time-wise. Like you can say, oh, this experiment set's gonna take me 6 weeks, but then something happens, your cells die, this or that, and now it's 3 months, not 6 weeks. So things, at least in a wet lab, rarely go the exact time you think they're gonna go.
100%. And learning how to tell your supervisor what reasonable expectations are, buffering in things going wrong is very important. As I recognize that some people have already started leaving, so I'm just going to quickly throw up a poll to see if you can give us some data on how helpful you found this whole session. So including the moderated discussion and the panel Q&A. I'll also put up the attendance form again in a second for anybody who didn't fill it out, or if you can, before you leave, you can fill out the paper form. We'll continue the questions. I just wanted to get this going just in case people had to leave. So one of the next questions that was on the Slido was, how would you choose between a career in academia or industry? So have you thought about careers in both, and what kind of factors do you consider when debating that? I know, Nicole, it's something that you mentioned, so do you want to speak to that?
I'm literally open to anything. And I think that's the thing is the reality. It's like talking to people. It's talking to people who've gone through the 10-year track in academia, talking to people that work in a hospital, talking to people that, you know, do work more in an industry related kind of component. I literally, at the end of this program, whatever job I can securely get, it's a great start, right? You can pivot. It's sometimes harder. Like academia is like, you need teaching experience, you need publications, you need things like that. So those are things that are also helpful if you're gonna go in whatever direction you go. So I think I plan for both, and then see what happens at the end of my hopefully only 4 years. But some people are very knowing what they want to do, and that's great. I'm very jealous of them. But I would just like a secure position. So I'm open to whatever.
Anything. Also have expectations of what you want to do. Do you like teaching? Because in industry, you probably won't be in a teaching position. Whereas like education and academia, like academia is very research focused, but also very teaching focused. So you'll get a little bit more of both worlds out of it. I will also say from an engineering perspective, if you want to be a practicing licensed engineer and get your professional engineer or PEng, you must have work experience. And grad school, no matter how long you take, only counts for 1 year, for 12 months. So consider that if you're in the engineering field, that you need 48 months of work under another PEng, which means you are guaranteed to need 3 years of industry experience before you can be a licensed engineer yourself.
I think a common theme that I've heard a lot between some of my friends who have stayed in, who've moved to industry is, if you want to do research, you can do research in both academia and industry, but they can be very different. So in academia, if you run your own lab, you can kind of choose the direction the research goes in and you can follow it whatever happens, you find something cool, you go down that path. And as long as you can get funding for it, you can continue down that path. Whereas in industry, you might be working on a project for a couple of months and you think it's going really well, but the company changes their strategic priority and that project's done. There's no debate, nothing. You cannot work on that anymore and you have to pivot to something different. And so it also depends on the kind of environments. You might have more resources for your research because it's, in general, industry can have a lot more money, but you may have to be okay with changing direction if they decide that that's no longer profitable or of interest. So there's a lot of different factors for considering. The environments are very different. Great. How did you manage pursuing school and financial responsibilities? Did you work? What jobs do you have? And are there scholarships?
So we mentioned that normally research-based masters and PhD, you get funding to some extent, and that will cover your tuition. That is separate from TA. So you can also TA on top of that. It gets you teaching experience and it gets a little bump up in pay. You can have a part-time job alongside. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I'd say like that was one of my things, if I could give like advice, would be figure out, don't be shy about it, like figure out the financial position of your program, figure out the stipend, figure out if your tuition is taken out of that or if you pay tuition from the amount you're given. Do you get all of the money you make from TA? Because it is departmental based. Some departments you'll get a top up on top of your stipend. Some, like my department, if I TA, I'll get all of my TA money. You need to know those things because you have to go to budget accordingly, especially if you're doing a PhD. You need to know how much you're making, how much is going for tuition, and then plan, like, is this a feasible amount? Because grad school is a financial commitment also. So you need to know those things and be able to budget. And then you need to say, okay, do I need to get a part-time job or do I not? Do I need to TA? Do I not? But those are things that I think going into it, you're mostly just stressed about like getting a position. I want to get into grad school and I want to be in a good lab. And then sometimes those other things, you can sort of let them go under the rug and say, oh, I'm just not going to ask that because it's awkward. But I would say like, be very honest and ask about the financial stuff.
And I would say a lot of that information is also available online nowadays. So if you're interested in a program in the department or in the Faculty of Medicine, which I think all of us were in at U of T, there are strict rules on how much you make and how much extra you get if you get a scholarship. And so you can see all of that. I can send all that information to every single one of you right now. So it's good to know. And sometimes really good when you're debating multiple different schools or multiple different programs to compare those things, because I know there are programs at U of T that seem very similar, but the compensation packages are completely different. So if you have two labs you like in two different departments and one is going to pay you a more reasonable living wage, that's an important thing to consider. There are programs, some schools, you have to TA to get your funding package. You don't make any additional money for TAing. And some of them, like at U of T, there aren't enough TAing or teaching assistant positions for people. So it's often extra. But it, again, depends on programs. So those are all really important details to understand how much of a financial burden grad school can be.
One very short point. Ask your supervisor, like this isn't something people want to consider, but what happens if you don't graduate on time? Because some programs say that supervisors don't have to pay you after your intended end date, but grad school often you're going to add a semester or 2 semesters or whatever it is. And you want to know, because that sometimes the supervisor has control over that and they can say, the department doesn't mandate this, but personally, I will pay you. And you can make sure that that is the case, or you can make sure you're in a department that requires that. But I think that's something to ask, like, will you be paid if this doesn't get clean 2 years in and out? Because you don't want to be in a situation where you're in for an extra year and you can't get paid.
And with that also being said, like, there's so many external scholarships. And I would argue and say, like, depending on your topic of research, some are easier to get than others. So if you have a very, I don't know, the word sexy, like, type of topic that, like, people are really interested in, it's easy to get funding, like external funding, or easier. And that's usually a good chunk of change. It's not, well, I understand and things like that. So it's nice. But there's also like bursaries, if you need money, things like that, the university always has extra money that you can always apply for. As well as with travel conferences, like travel pay and stuff like that. But it's not like you're gonna be taking a yacht vacation in 3 weeks, like that's not financially feasible at that way, but like.
Yeah, and nobody asked it, but on your CRA tax form, it's line 105. So all grant income goes on line 105.
I love that.
I just
yeah.
want to mention, because I think I guess depending on department, for some my department at least, depending on the value of your scholarship, you might not actually get it. It
Mhm.
counts towards your stipend. So you don't, unless it exceeds like the certain amount, then you get like, I think 4,000 top off, but you don't really see the rest of it.
Like you might, so yeah, like to give context, there's scholarships you apply for in grad school that are like $50,000, and it's like a grant you're applying for, but most of that will go to the lab you're in. And like for IMS, the rule is you get 4,000 from that if you get it, which is wonderful and nice. But it's when you see those online, you're not
You're not taking an
getting
additional 50%. Yeah.
that will essentially mean that your supervisor isn't paying you from their funding. They just get to say, okay, you got this grant, that's how we're paying you this year. But you don't get an extra $50,000. Yeah.
Which I think was alluded to. I think
Yeah.
it said like with undergraduate things, you can apply to grants and get funded for a summer research position, and that makes you much more attractive, makes to potential profs to take you on because they get someone working in their lab for free.
I remember when I was in undergrad, you could apply for Ontario graduate scholarships while you were still in your last year of your undergrad. And then you could get that. And then when you're applying to grad school, say, like, hey, I have this OGS, it's 15K or whatever it was, and it makes you more attractive as a student because it'll cost them less to hire you. I think OGS has changed its role, so may not be allowed to do that anymore. But there are other awards you can get. And also, even just having awards during your undergrad shows that other groups have found you fundable, so you're likely to receive funding in the future because those accolades look good. So I think they're always, if there are any award that you're eligible for ever, always apply because they're really great things to have on your CV and they can make a really big difference. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. So just to be cautious of everybody's time, I just want to give a big round of applause to our amazing panelists for sharing their insights. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. For anybody who hasn't filled out the attendance form, please do that using the QR code or the paper form on this slide. And we look forward to seeing you at the next session on communication skills. Thanks.
And that being said, if you already have like any questions, I'm sure all of us would be more than happy to just, if you email, you can get our email and whatnot. So feel free to like, again, network, utilize. Help with that. Yeah.
Thank you.